Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Time for another edition of Longhorn Weekly. This week it's brought to you by Bluebird Organizing. We'll tell you more about Bluebird Organizing later in the show. CJ, a little bit of a different twist. We always start with football on Longhorn Weekly, but we'll take it to the diamond for some football-related news. Jonah Williams makes his starting debut for Jim Schlossnagle over the weekend in a series sweep of then number 8 Auburn. Didn't really know what to expect. I haven't expected much from Jonah this year because when he got to campus and started working out with the team, he was recovering from the clavicle injury. So in theory, the lineup and the depth chart was kind of set, but Schloss hasn't liked what he's gotten from that corner outfield spot in left field ever since Max Ballou's injury forced Tommy Farmer to right field. I just kind of figured, hey, it was Jonah's turn to see what he can do. CJ, in 2 starts, he goes 5 for 7, 3 RBI, 2 runs scored, a stolen base. One of those hits was a bunt single in the Saturday run rule game. I knew he was talented. We knew he was a talented baseball player. But, CJ, to make your debut for all intents and purposes in a massive SEC series on Easter weekend and to do what he did, just outstanding stuff. It shows what a rare athlete Sark and Schloss have in Jonah Williams.
Yeah, you mentioned the bunt single. What about the 107-mile-per-hour liner to right field, right? I mean, he was barreling some balls up. I know that he got robbed a little bit of his first career hit down the line, and then what do you know? He just lined one right over center field, and what a debut, right? To your point, wasn't his actual debut on the field, but in terms of the starting lineup, absolutely tremendous week for Jonah Williams. I think Texas fans everywhere were pretty pleased with it. Of course, Texas, another sweep for the Longhorns, but for Jonah specifically, he looked like a pro. You know, he kind of carries himself in that manner, and to see him go out and have that level of production immediately once thrust into the starting lineup, I mean, I was over the moon with it. Very, very awesome weekend for him.
I think it's important to just remind everybody, because it's been a minute, I think, since they've thought about Jonah Williams, the baseball player, because he could have very easily just stayed at ball for the spring of his senior year and taken his chances with the draft and probably, been a top 3 to 5 round pick and signed a pretty hefty signing bonus. But he wants to play college football, wants to play college baseball. Schloss pointed this out, and it's worth mentioning. This isn't just a football player who's trying to play baseball. I mean, his brother was a second-round pick of the Texas Rangers. Nick Williams was actually, CJ, I know you're a Rangers fan and historian, you'll know this, was actually a key piece, a prospect piece the Rangers sent to Philly in 2015 as part of the Cole Hamels trade. So he grew up in a baseball family. Baseball is in his blood, and he's going to do this football-baseball double. The first guy we've seen do it at Texas since Shea Morenz back 30 years ago. He's going to do it until really he's forced to make a choice. But right now, CJ, he's helping Schloss. He's going to help Sark sooner or later. I think for both coaches, hey, just ride this thing out until you feel like the time constraints are such that he has to make a decision. But what a time to be alive to be watching Jonah Williams play baseball, knowing what's probably coming in the fall.
Yeah, 100%. I know Bobby Burton was hitting our group chat up, Jeff. He's saying he didn't like the slide at home plate. I get it. I think Texas fans all were kind of holding their breath anytime he kind of, exerts, crazy, action or anything like that on the diamond. But point being, it's fun, right? This is a blast to see him go out there, play some baseball. We know what kind of football player he is and can't wait to see him on the gridiron next fall. But to be able to see both, it is special. And I think it should be, enjoyed by all Texas fans at the moment. Because, again, you go, 5 for 7, 3 runs scored, Jeff. That's remarkable for any series. And now to know that he's going to be able on the gridiron next fall saying, hey, I'm about to, knock somebody out coming across the middle. Yeah, sign me up all the way.
Schloss has coached a lot of major leaguers, and he's coached some great athletes. He mentioned, too, and Texas baseball fans, you might want to just plug your ears for just a second. He did mention Jared Mitchell and Chad Jones, who were on that 2009 LSU baseball team that beat Texas in a best-of-3 final in Omaha. Both those guys, CJ, the only 2 guys in the BCS era to win football and baseball national championships. Jared Mitchell was the first-round pick of the White Sox. Chad Jones was actually a third-round pick of the Giants in football and a ninth-round pick in the draft in baseball. Could have had a lengthy NFL career had he not just mangled his leg in an automobile accident. But Schloss brought up both those guys. But then when he talked about Jonah, he said, I've never coached a guy like this.
Yeah.
And just a rare athlete he is at 6'3", 200 pounds. Schloss said even the weight work he's done with the baseball team, you're already seeing the body start to get built a little bit. And, like I said, we know what to expect from him. I think we know what to expect from him when football season gets here. But to mention a guy like Chad Jones, who was kind of the comp for Jonah Williams, CJ, because I haven't seen a guy like this. I don't know that you have or can remember one, but I can't remember a guy that like legitimately Schloss said that's what a big leaguer looks like when they walk through the door. I can't remember a guy. I know Kyler tried to do it at one point and actually did play baseball at OU. I just can't remember a guy with this kind of athletic profile that you can legitimately say he could either be an all-pro safety or he could be an all-star outfielder. I don't know which one, but it really seems like whichever path he chooses, he's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, no kidding. It is crazy, right? And to be able to play football at a level that he did at Galveston Ball, and then to turn around and hit 90-mile-per-hour sliders or whatever he's facing in the SEC, not easy, right? So again, I'll just keep harping on it. It's fun to watch, and I hope we get to see it for all of his time on the 40 acres to be able to juggle the both, because it's not an easy thing. It's a rare thing, and I think for Jonah specifically, it's something that separates him from the rest of the pack. So, I can't harp on it enough, Jeff. It's fun to watch, and I hope we get to watch it year after year after year.
Now, it's key to remember, Jonah's bound by the 20-hour rule, so he hadn't been able to even attend a ton of practices or a ton of meetings, but he gets over there whenever he can. But let's talk about, CJ, what's going on at Moncrief and what's going on at Denius Fields. The reality kind of hits us in the face this week because it's the last week of spring practice, but now it's like, okay, well, usually we can look forward to getting that last snapshot of the team before, everybody has exit meetings and you go into summer conditioning, but we don't get that because there's no spring game. As we get to this week, CJ, that sets in. Have your thoughts or emotions or feelings, anything changed on the fact that we don't get a spring game?
Not particularly. I know it's unfortunate to your point. We don't get to see these guys line up, and, you don't see a lot in the spring game, but last year you got to see the first step of a Colin Simmons, right? You knew after that he was going to be pretty darn good, even if you didn't already know that, right? For other players, it was the release of, Ryan Wingo off the line. You got to see those first moments for a lot of early freshmen, but you don't get to see that this year. And so what does that mean? It doesn't change a whole lot within the building, but it is unfortunate that, hey, you and I don't get to sit here and kind of theorize or hypothesize about what's going on in a specific position room, right? And I think that's one thing that we'll miss this year, but at the end of the day, it won't change anything for what's to come in the fall. And that's the whole point, right? Keep these guys fresh, keep these guys healthy, make sure that, one, they're retained on roster, right? That's another big part of this whole no spring game thing as well. But it's unfortunate, but it doesn't change anything.
We'll talk about the end of spring practice coming up here in just a minute. But right now, I need to tell you about our sponsor for for this week's edition of Longhorn Weekly, and that's Bluebird Organizing. I want to thank Perry and Bluebird Organizing. If your wife is feeling overwhelmed, if she constantly mentions how she wishes she could find items more easily, or she wants to park her car in the garage, but you don't have any space, or maybe she's complaining about tripping over the kids' toys. I know my wife has that problem. If you as her husband, if you're feeling like at a complete loss as to how you can help, spring cleaning is well on its way, and Mother's Day is just around the corner. So give your wife the gift of a lifetime with a customized organizing session from Bluebird Organizing. Perry, she's going to come into your space without judgment. She'll give your wife the organized kitchen, closet, or playroom or garage of her dreams, plus all those donations you've got at the end. Perry's going to take all those donations for you. It's going to leave you and your family relaxed and ready to enjoy the new space. Give yourself time to really settle in. It's time, guys, to give your wife the gift she'll love for years to come. Call or text 737-346-7779 to book your free in-person consultation today. Again, that's 737-346-7779. Or go to bluebirdorganizing.net. And we want to thank Perry and Bluebird Organizing for sponsoring this week's edition of Longhorn Weekly. CJ, let's talk about spring practice again. The end. No spring game this week, but you mentioned it right there. We've heard about enough of the freshmen to get an idea of which newcomers you can maybe count on. James Simon and that group of receivers on offense, and you go to defense, and hey, it's kind of all hands on deck at corner, and I think that competition is ongoing. But I think in a lot of ways, CJ, the portal activity the first weekend, I think it really answered all the questions we probably would have had. We figured, hey, if Texas doesn't go in the portal for a corner, they probably like the young talent they've got there, maybe the same at safety, but they went in the portal and got a receiver. They went in and got a tight end, and they went in and got a kicker and some more reinforcements on the interior D-line. So in a way, we don't get that snapshot, but CJ, I think Sark and the staff answered a lot of the questions that Gen Pop would have had with that first wave of portal guys.
Yeah, they addressed everything, and I can't say right now that there's another position where I'm thinking, okay, they need to go get X, right, Y, or Z. And I think that's what you would hope coming out of the spring window. And of course, with the portal and with a school like Texas, there's no reason to have a lapse at a specific position, right? You should be able to go out there, address all of your needs, and put together a team that can compete for a college football playoff spot in a spot for the national championship. And I think that's what Texas is doing, right? I've tweeted it out. We've talked about it, Jeff. Texas got a 2-year window with Arch Manning. If you don't go through every single avenue to ensure that your team is best suited for a national championship run with Arch Manning, you're failing the program. And right now, that's not what Sarkisian's doing. And I think Texas fans, again, they need to recognize that. They need to be appreciative of that. And I think that's something that will show up on the field. Again, not having a career reception at tight end, not having really anybody who's played extensive snaps at the wide receiver position with Moore and Wingo hurt. Well, you've addressed those spots. The interior defensive line, look, you're up to 4 guys out of the portal now. They've gone out and addressed that spot and kicker. We don't need to talk about it too much, but adding Mason Shipley, I think Texas fans will be pleased with that addition to the kicking room. Now it's just about piecing it all together. To your point, we don't get to see the holistic picture at the end of spring, but you do know that each room, if you go room by room, is in pretty healthy standing right now.
It also doesn't hurt, CJ, when you look north of the Red River and knowing that Jack Endress and Mason Shipley were 2 guys that Oklahoma would have loved to have had. But Texas managed to close the door really quick, got 2 needs taken care of, and you're taken away from an Oklahoma program that's in a massive kind of winter go home year, for lack of a better term, for Brent Venables. So anytime you can make yourself better while simultaneously taking something away from your rivals, it's a win-win. CJ, I want to make this point as we get into scholarship numbers. Position groups we're feeling more optimistic about. I'm feeling more optimistic about running back because of what we've heard about James Simon this spring, knowing the quick recovery Christian Clark has had from the Achilles injury, and on top of the fact that, they're going to get CJ Baxter back full go at some point to go along with Trey Wisner. And Jarrett Gibson, it sounds like he's had a productive spring. Your running back group, it's really deep. It's really talented. And that was a position too, CJ, where you said, okay, do they need to go in the portal, maybe kick the tires on some running backs? I don't think so, because of the injury returns and the early returns on the newcomers. I don't know if there's another position, CJ, where I'm feeling more optimistic than running back compared to what I was feeling about it going into spring ball.
Yeah, really the quick return of a Christian Clark changed the complexion of that room. And I know day one when we were out there, Jeff, saying, whoa, he's moving well. He's cutting. He looks like he's going 100%, and that's not what I was expecting coming into the spring. Great sign for Christian Clark. Of course, we can talk about James Simon and Ricky Stewart coming in. My whole thing is you got bodies now, right? And that was a big issue a year ago. You're down about 3.5 running back bodies a year ago for most of the season. And really, there was a lack of trust for a lot of those guys, right? They didn't like having Jaden Blue touch the ball all too often inside the tackles. They obviously didn't trust Jarrett Gibson a whole lot after some of those early down situations in the season. So you're pretty limited with what you could do. You couldn't deploy the pony package. Texas likes throwing 3 backs on the field at times with a little orbit motion or a back in motion at times. That was a lot of Ryan Niblett. And I know that now you have a James Simon. Now you got a Ricky Stewart. Now you can throw a Christian Clark into those situations and still have a Trey Wisner, 1,000-yard back, or a CJ Baxter, a former 5-star. I think that's huge for what Texas could be doing on the field next year with Arch Manning, whose legs, all in all, Jeff, could even be a big weapon in and of itself for the running back room.
Trey Wisner, CJ, he's in that group for me with Hodges Mitchell as the most underappreciated 1,000-yard rushers in the history of this program. Like, we talk about portal running backs and all this other stuff. You forget you got a guy that rushed for 1,000 yards last year and helped carry you to the finish line in a rivalry game in College Station against A&M. So just want to make sure anytime I get a chance to give Trey Wisner his flowers, that we do that. 1,000 yards in college football, not easy, but again, props to him. Don't take that for granted that you got a 1,000-yard rusher. CJ, you've got a story up on ontexasfootball.com right now. And don't forget, you can get over to ontexasfootball.com. If you're not a member, go ahead, subscribe over there. Use the promo code OTFOG. We'll get you $49.95, 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com. You're not going to want to miss that, especially when June official visits come up. And then after that, we'll be heading to the home stretch for SEC Media Days and then camp. So go ahead and sign up now while we've got the promo going on. But, CJ, you had a story up there Monday morning about scholarship numbers. You've been tracking the scholarship numbers, but you went position by position. Anything that really surprised you as you broke it down by position and looking at numbers for better or worse that surprised you?
Yeah, Texas up to 83 scholarships at the moment. Of course, they added 3 guys out of the portal on Friday. And after the departure of Malik Ogbo and Bert Auburn, they were down to 80, added 3 on Friday, now up to 83. That's where things sit. Of course, 85 is the limit. So still room if Texas wants to go out there and add a pair of portalers. But right now, Jeff, what's interesting, we talk about that edge room, right? Colin Simmons, Trey Moore, if you throw him back in that room, Ethan Burke, Colton Vosick, they got some guys. There's only 6 scholarships right now. Of course, Trey Moore listed as a linebacker on the roster. We know that he'll get some time still off of the edge, but 6 feels maybe a little thin, and maybe that was perhaps a reason why they brought in David Bailey out of Stanford for a visit. They pursued him. Maybe that's where they continue to look as the spring portal continues. But look, it's not a weak room by any means, right? We're expecting another All-American level season from Colin Simmons. That room is very healthy in terms of overall talent, but 6 feels maybe a little light in terms of what you see at depth from other positions. And I know Trey Moore will continue to see snaps off the edge. 6 maybe a little light.
Yeah, and we know interior defensive line is still an area that they'd like to address just because it's like offensive line. You really don't want to play true freshmen or young guys, period, unless you hopefully don't do it because you have to. Hopefully you're doing it because you've got a phenom, you've got a prodigy, and they're just that good. So interior defensive line, we know Texas will continue to look for help there, but maybe edge, CJ, maybe that gets filed away under some kind of best available player with that last scholarship. Maybe it's an edge, maybe it's another receiver that's got some return experience, but the fact that you've addressed your needs and you've still got 2 scholarships to play with, and who knows, maybe more, because there could be more portal attrition coming for Texas. There are a couple of position groups, we talk about it, in the secondary and the offensive line where you may see a guy or two decide that their opportunity to play probably isn't going to be at Texas. They may go ahead and jump in the portal window, especially you're seeing this flurry of activity because, again, until the House settlement gets finalized, guys want to lock in those NIL deals as soon as possible. I mean, go look at what happened with David Stone at Oklahoma over the weekend, case in point. But guys want to lock in those deals. Maybe we see some more portal activity, so another scholarship or 2 opens up. But I just like the way this roster is, CJ. Again, you can still address interior defensive line and then still have that one left to play with and say, hey, if it's an edge guy or a return guy, whatever, go ahead and lock it up.
Yeah, and you know what? It feels odd to just say, hey, go get somebody, but you got 85 for a reason, right? Might as well fill up. You never know, as Sarkisian has mentioned it several times, never know when depth might be needed at a specific position. So I say go find another guy at whatever position you see fit, right? It doesn't need to be a front-end guy, but somebody that can give you quality snaps if needed, I think is probably the fair way to use these 85 scholarships. Again, 2 are available. Do you need another interior defensive lineman? Do you want to go get a return man? I think you've figured out the specialists now. Mm-hmm. Point being, you got them, use them. That's how I view these scholarships.
All right, CJ, let's go back to baseball. We started that talking about Jonah Williams, but let's talk about the big picture. Obviously, as we sit here and record, we don't know the status of Jared Spencer, who had to leave that Thursday start against Auburn with some arm discomfort. Schloss doesn't envision him pitching this weekend. And this weekend, I think it's safe to say, CJ, of all the baseball series, we had LSU at home, you had Georgia, just got done with Auburn. Of all the series, this is the one that I think everybody has been waiting on since Jim Schlossnagle was hired. You've got number 1 Texas hosting a red-hot Texas A&M team coming into Disch-Falk Field. But for that game, by the way, Tuesday midweek game in San Marcos against Texas State, finishing off that home-and-home midweek series, which everybody behave yourselves in Hayes County, please, on Tuesday night if you're going to the game. I know things can get a little carried away at my neck of the woods, but just please, everybody, mind your P's and Q's. But, CJ, this weekend, We'll see what happens with the pitching plan on Friday. Schloss didn't want to overuse Ruger Riojas just in case they've got to change things. Maybe Riojas pitches the Friday game. You keep Luke Harrison on Saturday, and then depending on where the series is at, maybe you go bullpen, maybe you go Cade Bing, depending on what happens on Tuesday. A lot of things in flux for Sark. But CJ, I actually like the fact that A&M got hot, because this isn't an A&M team that's going to have their dauber down. They've got a reason to go out and compete. They've got new life. They feel like, hey, maybe they could get a more favorable seed in the NCAA tournament. We didn't even think a couple of weeks ago they were going to make the tournament. That's how it looked. But coming off of another sweep of a top 10 team at home, Schloss and company welcome the Aggies. This is what it's all about, man. This is going to have a super regional feel at Dish Falk this weekend.
Oh my goodness, another home series for the Longhorns. They get everybody at home. Isn't that the sentiment we're hearing? But
it's not fair. I mean, Greg Sankey's just doing so many favors for Texas. It's just not fair.
You would have thought every game was played at home this year for the Texas Longhorns. But point being, this is going to be a blast, right? This is what was expected, right? And maybe it wasn't expected. Texas was number one, right? Maybe that was the expectation for Texas A&M coming into the season. And of course, we've seen how their season's gone, but they're playing red hot, to your point, right? I don't know if there's a team hotter offensively in the country than what Texas A&M is putting out on the field over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And that's kind of what, they were looking for. The lineup was very stagnant in 2025. They figured it out. Now they get to face what was a red-hot pitching staff for the Longhorns, a nationally ranked ERA, 3 really good options to start games. Obviously, no Jared Spencer this weekend. But that's going to be really interesting on Tuesday. How does Schloss go about that Tuesday game? For me personally, I know Texas fans aren't going to like this. I would just say to hell with it. Put somebody out there that I know won't be needed or I haven't yet needed in a weekend series. I look at saying, just get me out of town on Tuesday, get me to the weekend, make sure that all of my arms that are available for the weekend are available for the weekend. That's how I'm looking at it. This is a big series. Anybody trying to downplay it, I don't understand it. You just took Texas A&M's coach. Now you're playing Texas A&M. You're ranked number 1. You got to come to play. I'm prepared, or I would prepare, Jeff, to do everything I could to win this series 100%.
Yeah, the Aggies are healthy, CJ. It's kind of what we've been waiting for. They're battling some injuries earlier in the year. And, Jace Laviolette, you figured it was going to be a matter of time before he turned things around. And boy, has he. He's entering as of the end of their Arkansas series. They took 2 or 3 from Arkansas. By the way, rock bottom for A&M, we've talked about it, was getting run rolled in Knoxville. Their only loss since then, a couple of weeks ago, they lost the front end of a doubleheader to Arkansas, and they won the back end of the doubleheader to take the series. Jace Laviolette coming out of that series, CJ, he's hitting .307 with an 1161 OPS, 15 bombs, 50 RBI, 97 total bases, looking every bit the part of a National Player of the Year type guy, which we know he's that caliber of guy. He's probably going to be a top 3 to 5 pick in the Major League Draft. So for a Texas pitching staff, probably not the offense you want, but CJ, that's life in the SEC. I feel like with LSU and then Georgia and now with A&M, there's been 3 different times this year where we've said, hey, maybe you're facing the best offense in the country. I can just say unequivocally, I'm sure, Jim Schlossnagle loves Jace Laviolette, loved him at A&M. I'm sure he's happy to see anybody except Ike Irish from Auburn in the opposing batter's box. A guy hits 4 home runs against you in a series, you're happy to not see him. Hopefully they don't see Auburn in the SEC tournament, because I can't imagine Ike Irish is going to get anything favorable to hit in Hoover if the Longhorns face Auburn again.
What a weekend, huh? Some guys just have your number, and for some reason it's just schools, right? Some guys just play well at certain fields. Well, to your point, Jeff, Texas, I'm sure, would be maybe looking for a quick pass. Hey, hit him with the 4.
Yeah.
Take base.
Give him the old Barry Bonds treatment, the intentional base on balls. CJ, it's not only a big week for Texas baseball, but Texas softball. They'll be north of the Red River all week. Wednesday, they go to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State. And then the National Championship Series rematch, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're in Norman to take on Oklahoma. We talked about it with Sark in football. Georgia for Sark and for the Texas football program has kind of been, that's the mountain you've got to climb. It's Mount Oklahoma and that dynasty that Pat Gasso has for Mike White and his team. You've got, if they can go to Norman and get this series win, they're right there in the thick of the SEC title race with Texas A&M. Who, it's really weird the way the SEC worked it, because you could have Texas A&M in a race, and that's what it's looking like. It's a race to the end for the SEC championship. They don't play each other during the regular season, so maybe they have to settle it in Athens during the SEC tournament. But CJ, this is kind of this again. We talk about baseball having a weekend circled. Texas softball fans, this is the one you've had circled, even with all and welcoming new opponents onto the schedule in the SEC. Going to Norman to face Patty Gasso's team, this is the one that I'm sure Mike White and everybody in that clubhouse has had circled ever since the schedule came out. They want to go to Norman and take this series. Yeah,
it's all been a kind of a series of progressions with softball, right? It was just win a game in the series, right? And that's a big knock against Patty Gasso Sooners, but now it's win the series, right? And Texas is in that conversation, obviously, having played them in the college, the softball College World Series a year ago. Now it's win the series. Now it's, hey, we're not seeing eye to eye anymore. We're trying to get over it, right? We're supposed to be the better team here. I know that this series is going to mean a lot, Jeff, but I can't imagine what it might look like should these teams play again in the postseason. But absolutely, that's the expectation now for Mike White. Go out there, win the series, come back, and move forward.
The old Big 12 is kind of running the SEC in softball. A&M is in first place with a 13-4 conference record. OU and Texas both enter this series 13-5 in conference play. So, again, a massive weekend for Mike White and the softball team, Jim Schlossnagle and the baseball team. Sark and the football team wrap up spring practice. Got fan day on Saturday, CJ. You got fan day and a baseball game across I-35 against A&M. Should be fun. Everybody, if you're traveling to Austin, be safe, enjoy yourself, bring the family. Should be a lot of fun on Saturday, all weekend on the 40 acres. One question as we get out of here. Is this a CJ Vogel Yeti Yard series against the Aggies?
If there's room. I know it's going to be packed, Jeff, but absolutely going to try to get out there and catch a couple games.
Can we look for you? Can the people look for you in left field? They need to know where to find you, CJ. They demand to know where you're at during these baseball games.
I'll have a hit it here sign.
We lost the Taco Shack bullseye sign in right field, so maybe you can walk around with that thing. That left field fence with Kimball Schuster, that got to work out in the Auburn series. So everybody be safe. Enjoy your week, a big week on the 40 acres. I want to thank everybody behind the scenes, Matthew and everybody, and Blake here behind the scenes at On Texas Football and over at ontexasfootball.com. Big thanks to everybody on the On Texas Football staff. Thank you, CJ, for your time, energy, effort, and knowledge. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another edition of Longhorn Weekly. For CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you for watching. And until next time, welcome.